In this video, we are going to walk through how to write a thesis statement for the comparative analysis essay. Whether you're new to this kind of writing or looking forward to refine your skills, I'm sure you will leave with something new to think about. I adapted this presentation from a very helpful handout from the Purdue OWL or Online Writing Lab. I recommend you to check it out. This is a two-part video, and in the first one, we will cover what a comparative thesis is and what are the main functions that it needs to accomplish. In the second part, we will talk about how to develop and write your thesis statement. There is a process that involves several steps, and we will break them down one by one. Remember that for this essay, the goal is not just to describe two texts. Neither it is to summarize them. You already did that. You will now offer insight into how and why their differences or similarities matter. So, what is a thesis statement? Basically is a sentence or two that clearly states the main point about the similarities and or the differences that you found between the texts you are comparing, and then takes those observations to the next level, answering the question, so what? So the strong thesis will not just point out that there are differences or similarities, but interpret them and make claims about why those differences and similarities matter. So a strong thesis will, first off, clearly state your main points. That is, your main point is what you want your reader to take away from your work. What do you want them to take away from the comparison? Then you should go beyond surface level observations and descriptions and make an arguable claim. That simply means that your claim is something that another person could disagree with. If I say this essay was about language, that's not much of an arguable claim. That's just a description. And then your thesis also should suggest or state the scope of your essay. That is, what aspects of the texts you will focus on. Are you going to analyze tone, structure, types of arguments, and maybe types of sources? And whatever you choose, and that stands out to you as you analyze your writing, your texts. So let's start with your claim. Your claim has to present an interpretation of the argument, of why the two texts or how the two texts relate, and what does that mean. We will look at some examples on the next slide, but for now, just keep in mind that a claim goes beyond simply describing. A claim tells your reader what your perspective is, what your interpretation is. It says why they are similar or different, or how they are similar or different, and why does that matter? It answers the question, so what? So it goes beyond what the difference is and addresses the why that is important, or so what. For example, here we can look at a sentence that is not a claim and add a sentence or a thesis that is a claim. For example, both essays discuss cultural identity. That is extremely vague. It's a summary. It's not a stance. It's not an argument. A stronger claim would be, while both essays explore cultural identity, essay A does so with narratives that are more compelling than essay B. that relies on theories. So see how the writer in the strong claim example not only described the differences between the two essays, that is, one consists of narratives and the other consists of theoretical material, but also makes a claim about how the narrative is more effective or more compelling. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into the arguable part of thesis. To be clear, a thesis is arguably means that is more than just it is a fact or it is not a fact. Your thesis should introduce an idea that someone could reasonably disagree with. So your thesis should invite discussion. It's not just reporting what's there, but it's making a case. So think of this following exercise. You have your thesis in front of you. You have written your thesis, you have worked hard, read your essays, and look at it and ask yourself, could someone else use the same evidence, the same essays that I'm using, and reach a different conclusion? If your answer is yes, then your thesis is doing its job. Then your thesis is an argument because somebody could have engaged in a debate with your idea. A common pitfall when writing theses is that we tend to make descriptive claims, as the column in the left shows. They may look like an argument, but they aren't exactly, because they don't take the extra step answering the so what question. You're not just telling us that the writers chose different styles, as in essay A, as in the first example, essay A uses humor, while essay B is formal and serious. That may or may not be true, but that is not interesting. It doesn't tell us anything about why that matters. You are telling us why that matters. Why does that difference change the reader's understanding? Does that difference reinforce certain ideas or challenge expectations? So what you need to do here is to dig into the choices that the authors make. What are the consequences of using humor? I'm going to focus only on the first example. I really encourage you to pause the video and read by yourself the other three to catch the nuances and differences. So, what are the consequences of using humor instead of logic or formality? How does a personal story change the way a reader is engaged compared to statistics, for example? And the idea is that every thesis needs to point toward larger than just the texts. Remember, it's about what those texts do. So let's look at the arguable interpretive claim at the first one again. So the part on the left shows the non-arguable version because, again, it just states that SAA uses a form of argument and SAB uses another form of argument or tone or style, however you want to look at it. It's not important for now. But look at the same thesis expanded to be an interpretive claim. That is a claim that makes an interpretation of what that means. It starts with essay A's humor makes cultural critique approachable. In other words, humor makes talking about difficult things in culture easier. Whereas essay B's serious tone makes it more difficult to have necessary conversations. So see, the author here acknowledged the differences in style. It says that essay A's humor does something. It says that essay B's tone does something, and explains what that difference is. humor more approachable, and serious tone makes it more difficult. Now, the third thesis that we mentioned was that it previews the scope and the structure of your essay. The scope refers to what areas in particular you will focus on. Will you compare tone? Will you compare narrative strategy? Will you compare level of formality? Will you compare maybe one text is a poem and another text is an article? So will you compare genre? Whatever it is that you do, you will signal the scope in your thesis. And then the structure refers to how your essay will be organized. Briefly indicates the argument without detailing each point. Remember, this is just the broad direction that you're giving your essay. So, for example, let's look at an example on the next slide. Here you have a thesis, Tan and Barrientos each explore language and identity. But Tan's storyteller builds pride while Barrientos emphasizes internal conflict. That would be your scope. As you can see, it establishes that the essay will be about cultural identity and how the responses from the reader are different. And then you might want to preview with another sentence that says something like, I will first contrast Tan's emphasis on family stories with Barrientos' focus, and that will allow me to reveal the effects of their choices. So the preview can be tagged along the one sentence thesis, but I recommend you to space them out. I recommend you to give the thesis and the preview of the points that you will cover to give each their own space so that they stand on their own. And this is the end of part 1. A quick recap. A thesis is a 1 or 2 sentence statement that establishes your main point. And for this essay, your thesis should consider both texts, notice differences and or similarities, and then say why those differences and similarities matter. Remember the so what question. And you have to make a claim, an argument, and preview the scope and structure of your paper. I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you in the second part where we will learn how to construct a thesis statement for the comparative essay.
Una producción de Profesortoledo.cl.
Si le gustó el video, dele un me gusta, compártalo en sus redes sociales y suscríbase a mi canal. Muchas gracias por su atención.